What if I told you that many medieval myths and superstitions were not just misconceptions, but actual instructions for survival? We are used to thinking of the Middle Ages as a dark time, filled with irrational fears and strange rituals. People believed in healing amulets, bad air, and the influence of the stars, which seems completely irrational to us today. However, behind this veil of prejudice often lay practical knowledge that helped entire communities avoid illness, preserve their harvests, and maintain social order. These beliefs, passed down from generation to generation, formed a unique system of security based on observation and experience. Watch the video to the end to learn how the belief in the 4 bodily humors laid the foundations of dietetics, and how the fear of miasmas led to the emergence of the first urban hygiene. I will reveal the most closely guarded secret of medieval doctors, which was actually based on a profound misconception, but paradoxically saved lives. Medieval medicine was based on the humoral theory inherited from ancient thinkers, which claimed that the human body consists of 4 basic fluids, or humors. These fluids were sanguine, associated with vital moisture, phlegmatic, choleric, and melancholic. Each of these juices corresponded to one of the 4 natural elements: air, water, fire, and earth. It was believed that a person's character and physical condition directly depended on which of these fluids predominated in their body. According to this theory, perfect health was an ideal balance of all 4 fluids in the body. Any ailment or illness was interpreted as a disturbance of this delicate balance caused by an excess or deficiency of one of the humors. For example, it was believed that an excess of phlegmatic fluid made a person sluggish and apathetic, while a predominance of choleric fluid made them irritable and quick-tempered. Medieval physicians saw their main task not in combating symptoms, but in restoring the lost harmony of bodily fluids. It was a comprehensive approach that touched on all aspects of the patient's life.
Melancholic and phlegmatic.
Diagnosis within the framework of humoral theory was a complex art that required great observation and experience from the physician. He carefully studied the color of the patient's skin, measured the frequency and nature of the pulse, and paid attention to body temperature and general behavior. All these observations allowed him to conclude which fluid was out of balance and needed correction. This process was like solving a complex puzzle where every little detail was important for making the correct diagnosis. The physician had to take into account not only the physical condition, but also the season and even the weather. The most interesting part begins when we look at the treatment methods that stem from this theory. The practical use of the myth was that medieval thinkers extended the classification of elements to all surrounding objects, including food. Each food product was considered hot, cold, wet, or dry in nature. For example, pepper was considered hot and dry, while cucumbers or melons were classified as cold and wet foods. This system created a complex matrix that physicians used to make recommendations. In practice, this led to the creation of the first individual diets based on the patient's temperament. If a person was diagnosed with an excess of hot choleric fluid, which could manifest itself in fever or irritability, they were prescribed a cooling diet. It was recommended that their diet include more fish, vegetables, and fruits, which were considered cold. Conversely, cold and wet, phlegmatic people were advised to eat hot foods such as roasted meat, spices, and wine to disperse their fluids. Although the humoral theory itself was fundamentally incorrect, its practical application had an unexpected positive effect. This system made people think about what they ate and how food affected their well-being. It encouraged diversity in the diet, since maintaining balance required consuming foods with different qualities. People could not eat only bread or porridge. They were forced to seek out vegetables, herbs, fruits, and meat products to satisfy the complex prescriptions of their doctors. Moreover, this theory closely linked diet to the seasons, which was also an intuitively correct step. In winter, which was considered a cold and wet season, the system prescribed eating more hot and dry foods. In practice, this meant a more calorie-dense diet rich in root vegetables, pickles, and meat, which objectively helped the body survive the cold period. In summer, the hot season, The emphasis was on cooling foods, fresh greens, fruits, and dairy products, which helped people tolerate the heat more easily. Thus, following a false myth, medieval people intuitively came to the principles of balanced and seasonal nutrition. They may not have understood what vitamins or trace elements were, but the humoral theory pushed them to consume a wide range of foods. This accidental diversity in their diet played a critical role in preventing vitamin deficiencies and other ailments associated with a monotonous diet. Belief in mystical fluids resulted in a very real improvement in health. It is worth noting that the influence of the theory extended not only to food, but also to a person's entire lifestyle. A doctor's recommendations could include prescriptions for physical activity, sleep, and even choice of residence. This complex and, at first glance, absurd system, based on the mistake of ancient philosophers, created the first concept of individual dietetics and healthy lifestyle in history. It taught people to listen to their bodies and actively manage their condition through nutrition and activity. I'm very interested to hear your point of view. What do you think about how a false theory could have brought real benefits in those days? Write about it in the comments and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new episodes. Are you ready to learn the truth about what saved medieval cities from complete extinction long before the discovery of microbes? That salvation was a panic-stricken fear of bad air, or the miasma theory. People at that time were firmly convinced that many diseases and ailments were transmitted not through direct contact, but through the inhalation of poisonous vapors emanating from rotting waste, stagnant water, and unclean sewage. The smell of decay itself was considered not just unpleasant, but deadly dangerous. Although this belief had no scientific basis in the modern sense, it was of great practical importance for survival in the crowded medieval cities. The fear of miasmas was a powerful motivator for the first public hygiene measures in history. Fearing outbreaks of illness, city authorities issued decrees regulating street cleaning and the removal of garbage outside the city walls. This was a direct fight against the sources of bad air. The entire life of a city dweller was permeated with attempts to protect themselves from the invisible threat hanging in the air. Wealthy people carried so-called pomanders with them, special aromatic balls in open-work containers. These pomanders were filled with strong-smelling substances, musk, ambergris, and herbs such as rosemary, cloves, and lavender. It was believed that inhaling a strong, clean aroma protected against the dirty air of miasmas. Paradoxically, there was some truth in this misconception. Many of the herbs used in pomanders and for fumigating rooms do indeed have antiseptic and bactericidal properties. For example, essential oils of lavender, rosemary, or eucalyptus are capable of purifying the air of pathogens to a certain extent. Thus, in trying to protect themselves from mythical miasmas, people unconsciously conducted aromatherapy sessions with a real disinfecting effect. Fear of miasmas also dictated the rules for building and choosing a place to live. People tried to settle as far away as possible from places considered to be sources of dangerous vapors. These places primarily included swamps, stagnant ponds, and artisan quarters associated with dirty industries, such as tanneries or slaughterhouses. This practice intuitively reduced the risks associated with real threats, such as insect carriers from swampy areas. Inside the houses, there was also a constant struggle for clean air. Regular ventilation of rooms, even during the cold season, was considered an essential practice. People believed that drafts blew out stagnant miasmas and brought in fresh, healthy air. In addition, floors in homes were often sprinkled with fresh herbs such as mint or wormwood, which not only masked unpleasant odors, but also repelled insects, which also contributed to improved sanitary conditions. City authorities took more extensive measures dictated by miasma theory. In some cities, attempts were made to drain nearby swamps or clean up ditches filled with stagnant water. Strict regulations were issued for artisans, obliging them to dispose of production waste in such a way that it did not create a foul odor within the city limits. These measures were a direct consequence of the fear of smell, but their effect was very real. During outbreaks of mass illness, these practices became widespread. Large bonfires were lit in city streets in the belief that fire and smoke would purify the air of contagion. Although the smoke itself could be harmful, the heat from the fires could actually destroy pathogens and, more importantly, scare away rats and other carriers of disease. It was a desperate but somewhat effective attempt to stop the spread of disease. The miasma theory also influenced the creation of the first public hospitals and clinics. They were located on high ground or in well-ventilated areas, away from the hustle and bustle and dirt of the city. In the sanatoriums themselves, great attention was paid to ventilation and cleanliness, as it was believed that the accumulation of sick people in one place would inevitably lead to a concentration of dangerous miasmas. This practice, based on myth, laid the foundations for hospital hygiene. Thus, the false scientific theory of bad air became the driving force behind progress in public utilities and public hygiene. It forced people for the first time in history to systematically combat dirt, waste, and foul odors, which objectively made the urban environment safer for living. In the next chapter, we will talk about how belief in invisible patrons helped people create masterpieces and support each other in difficult times. What I am about to show you was hidden behind the beautiful image of religious rituals, but in reality was a powerful economic and social system of survival. I am talking about the cult of patron saints of crafts. In medieval society, every professional guild, whether carpenters, masons, shoemakers, or weavers, was under the heavenly protection of a specific saint. This belief was not just a formality, it permeated the entire life and work of the craftsman. At first glance, this seems like pure superstition, a way to secure divine support in their difficult work. Craftsmen prayed to their patron saint for a steady hand, a keen eye, and good luck in their work. However, the practical benefit of this myth lay much deeper in the realm of social and economic organization. Belief in a common patron saint transformed a group of competing craftsmen into a true brotherhood. This brotherhood was not an empty word. The guild, united under the banner of its saint, functioned as a complex social mechanism. One of its main functions was to establish and maintain the highest standards of product quality. Craftsmen worked not only for money, but also for the glory of their patron saint. Making a poor quality item meant not only deceiving the buyer, but also insulting the saint and disgracing the entire guild. This approach was of great practical importance for the whole society. Guild statutes, which were adopted as if with the blessing of a saint, strictly regulated production technology, the quality of materials, and even working hours. There were special inspectors from the guild who checked the products of their colleagues. This was the first quality control system in history, which guaranteed the consumer that they would receive a reliable and durable product, whether it was a pair of shoes or a new house. In addition to quality control, the workshop system, reinforced by the myth of the patron saint, performed a vital economic function. The workshop regulated product prices, preventing craftsmen from dumping and ruining each other in the course of competition. It also limited the number of craftsmen and apprentices in the city, protecting the market from oversaturation and guaranteeing each member of the guild a stable income. It was a system that ensured the economic survival of an entire social stratum. The most important and unique benefit of this myth was the creation of the first social insurance system in history. Each member of the guild was required to make regular contributions to a common fund, often called the Holy Fund. This money was not only used to organize religious festivals in honor of the patron saint or to buy candles for the chapel. It formed a mutual aid fund, which was a real salvation in the harsh realities of the Middle Ages.
Nay, the fever holds.
If a craftsman fell ill and could not work, the guild paid him benefits from this common fund, supporting him and his family. In the event of a master's death, his widow and remaining orphans were not thrown out onto the street. The guild took them under its wing. The widow was paid a lifetime pension, and the master's sons were taken in for free training by other members of the brotherhood, giving them a profession and a start in life. This system was a unique mechanism for social survival, with no analogs outside the guild walls. It was based not on state coercion, but on a voluntary association of people, bound together by a common faith and professional pride. The myth of the patron saint created a sense of solidarity, responsibility for one another, and confidence in the future. Moreover, guild brotherhoods often took on other social functions. They could maintain a small infirmary for their members, organize joint purchases of raw materials at lower prices, or even field their own militia to defend the city walls. All this was done under the auspices of the patron saint, whose name served as a symbol of unity and collective strength. Thus, belief in a heavenly patron of the craft became a powerful tool for the self-organization of society. It helped people not only to survive individually, but also to prosper collectively, creating complex social and economic structures. Like this video if you learned something new about medieval guilds, and be sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss new videos about the amazing survival methods of the Middle Ages. What if everything you've been taught about alchemists as sinister charlatans trying to cheat nature isn't entirely true? The popular image of an alchemist is a person obsessed with two ideas: creating the philosopher's stone to turn base metals into gold, and finding the elixir of eternal life. These goals were certainly mythical and unattainable, but it was the pursuit of this myth that led to remarkable practical discoveries that helped humanity survive. The alchemical laboratory was the first true research center in history. In their search for the philosopher's stone, alchemists did not just read ancient texts, they experimented. They melted, mixed, heated, cooled, and filtered every substance they could get their hands on. This method of trial and error, though chaotic, was essentially the precursor to modern scientific experimentation. Each failure was documented and analyzed, adding to the pool of practical knowledge. One of the greatest achievements of alchemy, which directly influenced survival, was the improvement of the distillation process. In their attempts to extract the pure quintessence from various liquids, alchemists created and perfected the distillation cube, or alembic. This allowed them to learn how to obtain highly concentrated alcohol. This discovery had enormous consequences for medicine. Alcohol became the first powerful and affordable antiseptic in human history. Medieval doctors and barbers, many of whom were closely associated with alchemy, began to use it to treat wounds and sterilize surgical instruments. Although they may not have understood the nature of infection, they saw in practice that treatment with an alcohol solution significantly improved healing and reduced the risk of fatal outcomes. This saved countless lives. In addition, alcohol became the ideal base for creating medicines. Alchemists discovered that it perfectly dissolves and preserves the active substances from medicinal plants. This is how the first tinctures, elixirs, and extracts appeared. This made it possible not only to preserve the healing properties of herbs for many months, but also to create more concentrated and convenient preparations than simple decoctions or powders. In their endless experiments on the transmutation of metals, alchemists discovered and described the properties of many key chemicals. They learned to extract and use strong acids, such as sulfuric, nitric, and hydrochloric acids. These substances immediately found application in crafts. Alchemists also made a huge contribution to the development of metallurgy and mining. In their quest to find the prime matter of metals, they studied ores, created new alloys, and described smelting processes. They learned how to separate silver from lead, purify mercury, and work with antimony. This knowledge was critical to the economy and military, providing kingdoms with high-quality metal for coins and weapons. In addition to chemistry, alchemists laid the foundations for laboratory practice. They invented and standardized dozens of types of laboratory glassware and equipment that chemists still use today. Glass retorts, flasks, water baths, temperature-controlled furnaces, all of these were created in the dim light of alchemical laboratories. Even the very idea of the elixir of life, although a myth, had practical uses. It motivated alchemists to search for and study any substances that could improve health and prolong life. This led to the birth of itrochemistry, or medical chemistry, which focused on creating medicines from minerals and chemical compounds, not just herbs. It was a revolutionary step for medicine. Thus, the myth of the alchemical great work became the catalyst for the birth of several practical disciplines at once: chemistry, pharmacology, and metallurgy. In pursuit of illusory gold, alchemists found something much more valuable: practical knowledge that changed the world. In the next chapter, you will learn how people looked at the stars not only out of curiosity, but also for very earthly, practical needs. In the medieval world, belief in the influence of celestial bodies on earthly life was absolute. Astrology was not considered superstition. It was a respected discipline closely intertwined with astronomy, mathematics, and medicine. It was believed that the position of the planets and stars at the moment of a person's birth determined their fate, and that the phases of the moon and the passage of the sun through the signs of the zodiac directly influenced everything that happened on Earth, from the mood of kings to the harvest in the fields. For a peasant whose life depended entirely on the whims of nature and a successful harvest, this belief had not an abstract, but a purely practical significance. He had no access to scientific agronomic knowledge, but he had an almanac. These popular printed or handwritten calendars, compiled by astrologers, were real survival guides. They contained not only church holidays, but also detailed instructions for agricultural work for each day. This myth about the influence of the cosmos on plants became the basis for the strict organization of the entire agricultural cycle. Astrological calendars clearly indicated on which days, depending on the phase of the moon or the sign of the zodiac, one should sow, plant, weed, hill, or harvest. At first glance, this seems completely nonsensical, but the practical benefits of this system were enormous. Peasants, most of whom were illiterate, received simple and understandable guidance for action. They did not need to rely on intuition or omens. They simply followed authoritative instructions. This schedule, dictated by the stars, ensured that all necessary agricultural activities were carried out on time. Moreover, these almanacs accumulated centuries of experience in observing nature, simply clothed in astrological form. Recommendations for planting certain crops often coincided with the actual, optimal agronomic timing for a given region. The astrologers who compiled the calendars largely codified existing folk wisdom, giving it the authority of divine providence. The system also took into account weather cycles associated with the movement of celestial bodies. For example, certain days were considered favorable for gathering firewood. Most likely, these were simply periods that, according to many years of observation, were most often dry. The instructions not to shear sheep during wet signs of the zodiac may have been a way to avoid wool loss or illness in animals during unfavorable weather. Want to know the secret that was kept behind high monastery walls for centuries and gave people a real chance at healing? This secret lay in the monastery gardens, but not in ordinary vegetable gardens, but in the so-called hortus medicus, medicinal gardens. Monks believed that divine providence did not leave man without help and placed healing power in the surrounding plants. There was even a myth about signatures, according to which the appearance of a plant suggested what it was intended for. Today, this doctrine of signatures seems naive and almost fairy tale-like to us. Monks believed that a leaf resembling the liver in shape should help with ailments of this organ, and a flower in the shape of an eye should heal vision. Root vegetables with bizarre shapes could be considered a means of strengthening the body. This false premise, however, had an incredibly important practical consequence. It motivated monks to study the world of flora meticulously and attentively. Guided by this mystical idea, monks became the first systematic collectors and cultivators of medicinal plants in Europe. They gathered herbs in the surrounding forests and fields and exchanged seeds with other monasteries, creating rich collections in their gardens. Each monastery strove to have a complete set of divine medicines for all possible ailments. But the monks did not just collect plants. They were among the few literate people of their time. They carefully described each plant, sketched its appearance, and indicated where and when it was collected. Most importantly, they kept detailed records of how the plant was used and what effect it had on patients in the monastery hospital. This is how the first herbals, or herbariums, were born, medieval pharmacopoeias. In the course of this work, motivated by the myth of signatures, a wealth of practical experience was accumulated. The monks quickly noticed that some plants indicated by the signature did not actually work. At the same time, they discovered that other herbs, which had no clues, had powerful and consistent healing effects. experience and observation gradually prevailed over pure mythology. The myth of divine signatures started a process that led to the birth of modern pharmacognosy, the science of medicinal plants. Belief in a mystical connection between form and function made people look closely at their surroundings and discover a whole natural pharmacy there. But what if there were no medicines at hand? In the next chapter, we will explore how simple rituals involving food and water saved lives. In the medieval mind, the boundary between the material and spiritual worlds was very thin. People believed that simple substances such as water, salt, or food could be contaminated by invisible evil forces and cause harm to humans. To protect against this threat, there were complex and widespread rituals of consecration. By reciting prayers and performing certain actions, the priest would purify these substances, making them safe and even healing. This deeply rooted myth of spiritual purification often masked very real and vital hygiene procedures. Take, for example, the ritual of consecrating a new well in a village. This ceremony was a big event, but before the priest sprinkled the well with holy water, the community had to clean it up. The ritual often included the mandatory preliminary cleaning of the well from silt, dirt, and debris that had accumulated at the bottom. Such cleaning, carried out under the pretext of preparing for the sacred ceremony, was of great sanitary importance. The removal of decaying organic debris and dirt directly improved the quality of the water, making it safer to drink. People may not have known about bacteria, but they knew for sure that after consecration, preceded by cleaning, the water in the well tasted better and caused less illness. The myth served as a guarantee of regular maintenance of the water source. The same applies to rituals related to food. In many monasteries and even in pious families, there was a rule of mandatory ritual hand washing before meals. This was done not so much for hygiene reasons as for spiritual reasons. It was forbidden to touch consecrated food with unclean hands. Nevertheless, the practical effect of this mystical rule was obvious. Simply washing your hands before eating greatly reduced the risk of intestinal disorders. Let us also consider the attitude towards salt. In the Middle Ages, salt was not just a seasoning, but a strategic resource, the main preservative that allowed meat and fish to be stored for the long winter months. The consecration of salt was an important ritual. This process gave salt a special, sacred status. Consecrated salt was treated with great reverence and respect, stored in special clean and dry chests, and protected from dirt and moisture. This careful attitude, dictated by faith, was in practice an ideal way to store the main preservative. Clean and dry salt performed its functions much better, protecting food from spoilage. The use of contaminated or damp salt could lead to the loss of all winter supplies, condemning the family to starvation. The myth of the consecration of salt forced people to observe the technology of its storage, which was critical for survival. Another interesting example is the preparation of medicinal herbal decoctions, which was often accompanied by prayers and rituals. It was believed that prayer endowed the decoction with healing powers. However, the preparation process itself, regulated by ritual, often required prolonged boiling of water. This action, intended to fully transfer the power from the herb to the water, was in fact a sterilization process. Medieval man lived in a world filled with not only visible but also invisible threats. People believed that the air could be inhabited by evil spirits, plague winds, and other immaterial entities that brought illness and misfortune. To combat this invisible threat, there was one proven and powerful mystical tool: incense burning or fumigation. It was believed that the smoke from a fire, incense, or certain herbs would drive out evil and purify the space. This myth about the purifying power of smoke had a very strong practical basis. The fact is that ritual fumigation did not use random wood, but specific plants and resins. Most often, branches of juniper, wormwood, rosemary, and thyme were thrown into the fire, and the resins of coniferous trees and, of course, incense were also used. When burned, all these substances released smoke saturated with volatile phytoncides and other chemical compounds with powerful antiseptic properties into the air. Without knowing it, medieval people carried out real disinfection sessions in their homes. Juniper smoke, for example, is known for its strong bactericidal properties, and is capable of killing many pathogenic microorganisms in the air and on surfaces. The same applies to wormwood and rosemary. Fumigating the room where the patient was located did indeed reduce the concentration of contagion in the air, reducing the risk to other household members. In addition, the smoke from many of these plants also has insecticidal properties. It effectively repels or even kills insects such as fleas, lice, and mosquitoes. Fumigation was even used directly in medicine. Doctors often prescribe patients with lung diseases to inhale the smoke of certain herbs. It was believed that the smoke penetrated inside and burned out the disease. In practice, this was the first form of inhalation. Inhaling thyme or eucalyptus smoke, when it became available, could bring real relief as the essential oils of these plants have expectorant and antiseptic properties. Nothing characterizes medieval superstitions as much as the belief in the power of amulets and talismans. Today, this belief seems extremely naive, but it did have its practical value. This value can be divided into two components, a small material one and a huge psychological one. Let's start with the material one. Sometimes the materials from which amulets were made had certain useful properties in themselves. For example, silver, which was often used to make protective medallions and crosses, has weak but real antibacterial properties. Silver ions are capable of suppressing the growth of certain microorganisms. Drinking from a silver cup could disinfect water to some extent. It was a small but still a bonus to survival, based on the myth of the purity and protection of the noble metal. Some amulets were small bags filled with herbs, the same ones used for fumigation: lavender, rosemary, wormwood. Carrying such a bag on one's body may have repelled some insect carriers. The strong smell of herbs could also act as a personal pomander, protecting against bad air in a crowd. Again, the effect was minimal, but in the struggle for survival, every little thing mattered. However, the main and undeniable benefit of amulets was their psychological function. In a world full of real and imagined dangers, where human life was fragile and depended on many uncontrollable factors, an amulet provided the most important thing: a sense of security. It was the material embodiment of hope, a personal shield against chaos. The belief that you were under protection radically changed a person's psychological state. This phenomenon is well known today as the placebo effect. When a person firmly believes in the effectiveness of treatment or protection, their brain triggers internal mechanisms of self-regulation and healing. A person wearing an invincible talisman behaved more confidently and calmly. In case of illness, they did not panic, which only exacerbates the condition, but were confident that their protector would help them cope. This psychological attitude, this will to live, multiplied by faith, often became a decisive factor in the fight against disease. In the Middle Ages, one of the most widespread myths was the belief in the healing power of holy places. People believed that if a person suffered from a serious illness that local doctors could not cure, their last hope was a pilgrimage. The long and difficult journey to a distant shrine where the saint's relics were kept was considered an act of great piety for which one could receive divine forgiveness and, as a result, healing. At first glance, this practice seems desperate and irrational. Instead of resting, a sick person would embark on a dangerous journey that could take months or even years. However, if we look at this phenomenon from a practical point of view, pilgrimage could paradoxically have been one of the best strategies for survival and treatment available at the time. First, pilgrimage was the only socially acceptable way to completely change one's environment. A medieval peasant or townsman spent his entire life in the same place, breathing the same air, drinking the same water, and eating the same food. If the source of his ailment lay in the local water, poor food, or unhealthy conditions in his home, leaving that place was his only chance of recovery. Secondly, on the road, pilgrims had access to infrastructure that was unavailable in their home villages. Along all the main pilgrimage routes, there was a dense network of monasteries and shelters. These places were obliged to provide pilgrims with shelter, food, and care free of charge. Every large monastery had its own hospital, infirmary, and apothecary garden, which we have already mentioned. Upon arriving at such a monastery hospital, a sick pilgrim fell into the hands of monks, who were the most educated doctors of their time. He received qualified care, regular and high-quality food, as well as treatment with proven herbal remedies. In essence, pilgrimage was a way to get a ticket to the best sanatorium of the time. The chances of recovery in such conditions increased dramatically. Thirdly, an important factor was the holy springs, which were often located near shrines. Thousands of pilgrims drank from them and washed themselves in them, believing in their miraculous power. The mystical component was important, but the practical benefit was that these springs were often simply clean, unpolluted springs or streams. While wells in towns and villages could be polluted, water from a holy spring was clean and safe. The long journey itself, although difficult, had its advantages. The need to walk many kilometers every day was a serious but measured physical exertion. For people suffering from ailments associated with a sedentary lifestyle, such therapeutic exercise in the fresh air could bring enormous relief. It also stimulated the appetite and improved the overall condition of the body. We can see that the medieval world was much more complex than it seems at first glance. Behind many myths that today make us smile, there was real, centuries-old experience of survival. People found practical use in astrology, alchemy, and even fear of bad smells, creating working systems based on them. These beliefs were not just mistakes, but a way of organizing life in very difficult and dangerous conditions. This experience proves that human ingenuity is capable of finding ways to survive even when there is no access to scientific knowledge. People clothed their practical observations in the form of myths, rituals, or superstitions because it was the only way to preserve and pass on vital information to future generations. Studying these myths allows us to better understand not only our ancestors, but also the mechanisms of human adaptation themselves. What other hidden practices from the Middle Ages do you know of that help people survive? What topics from this era would you like to see in future videos on our channel? Be sure to write about it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss our new research.